Hi everybody, it's Professor Snart checking in here. Okay, we are, getting right down to the last, basically, week and a bit in our 5-week term here, so it really flies by. I'm a little bit early recording this video, but obviously it helps if I can get the video posted, so I'm sort of out in front of our due dates a little bit. So it's Tuesday morning when I'm recording this, June 18th. We are looking at our Unit 4 first deadline here. I already did that Unit 4 video, so I won't really get into too much of that. Obviously, there's that reply component that'll be out here, and I'm going to talk primarily about Unit 5 today. So again, I'm way out in front of this one, but by the time you're getting into the course, kind of wrapping up the main stuff for Unit 4, you'll want to take a look at this so that you understand what's going on for Unit 5. Unit 5 is kind of a fun one, or hopefully a fun one. It involves two clearly related projects. One is fairly straightforward, at least relative to some of the stuff that we're doing in class. But the second related part is kind of a bit of a wrinkle that I think is sort of interesting. So I'm going to walk us through that. And then honestly, we just have our last unit to finish up, and that brings us right to the very end of the term. Somewhat awkwardly, the first 5-week ends on that Monday, July 1st, just because of the way the calendar falls. But certainly once we're wrapped up here and we've kind of walked through a little bit of Unit 6, you can, be finishing the course a little bit early. So it's not like you have to wait until, obviously, that very last date to be turning things in. Okay, so let's jump into Unit 5 here. So again, Unit 4 had us doing a fairly traditional kind of essay assignment, doing a comparison between a piece of poetry, one of the readings from the unit, and then a piece of music that's of interest to you, maybe has some, significant sentimental value or whatever, and finding similarities between those. The twist being that we're doing that as a video essay. Again, you don't have to be on camera, but you can find some interesting ways of showing us something on your screen that really helps to make that comparison come to life. So that will take us into Unit 5 here. Our Poets and Poems project, again touching on pretty much every one of our course objectives here. And like I say in big, bold, highlighted, kind of hurt your eyes yellow, I think it's useful, especially here, but really throughout our course, to make sure that you've looked at this whole unit before you jump in to this very first part. So basically, we're going to do, or you're going to do, a kind of report. That's a really boring word for describing it, but you're going to introduce us to a poet of your choice and a few works by that poet, using either like a Google slide deck, or maybe you just want to build out your existing portfolio. So again, introducing us to who that poet is, maybe some historical background, again, depending on when or where the person lived, some cultural context, and then analyzing at least 3 of the works. And I get into more detail down here. But one thing that I want to highlight is that you don't have to choose someone kind of like really obvious or quote-unquote famous, almost like the dead white guy type thing. It's certainly okay if you're interested, like legitimately interested in some of these other poets, like Edgar Allan Poe is a very common one that people have run into before. Obviously someone like Shakespeare, sort of the older dead, right, famous, what we would say canonical figures. So you can certainly do somebody like that. Again, ideally it's of interest to you, so you're not just picking something because, it showed up on Google. But you're not locked into someone who lived a long time ago and shows up in all the literature anthologies and textbooks and stuff like that. So you can pick someone who's more contemporary, maybe even someone who speaks a little bit more to you, to relevant contemporary issues, writes in a more contemporary style, for example, than something like Shakespeare. The only caveat, though, is that we don't just want to Google someone who publishes or self-publishes on like a blog or posts poetry to Facebook or, something like that. You want to pick somebody, even if it's a contemporary living, person, who is really identifying as a poet, who works as a poet, who actively publishes books through real publishers or in, peer-edited venues. So it's not just someone who write stuff and post it to the web. It needs to be someone kind of, I don't want to say famous exactly because that's not the right word, but hopefully you get the idea, who's really like a professional poet. It doesn't mean that they couldn't also be, hold a teaching position at a college or university, which is very common for a lot of working writers today. But again, their primary thing that they're known for is publishing, and widely known, not just a couple of their friends visit their blog. So again, if you're unsure about this, you can always shoot me an email just to make sure you're 100% before you move through, but hopefully you get the idea. So you're going to build out at least either 5 separate new pages on your portfolio site, or a 10 slide deck that again is going to introduce us to the poet, him or herself, provide biographical info, relevant social or historical stuff. Again, you can sort of choose like what's important. And what I really want you to do is not just list a bunch of facts that you've kind of cut, pasted, or reworded a little bit from whatever sources you've been using, but take that information and try to tie it to either why you were interested in this poet to begin with, or maybe tie it to some of the themes that are happening in the works here. So it's not just a bunch of Googled facts that you're plunking into a slide deck. It's that there's actually some like analysis going on, or some connections that you're making between the work of the poet and the kind of historical or biographical or cultural detail that you're providing here. Again, like make it interesting and engaging, make it creative. We're not going to get too hung up on perfect MLA style citation, but you do of course want to have a resources page that will indicate where your information is coming from. I would even encourage you to cite on the pages themselves, just a little note at the bottom that says, you know, gives us a URL or a website or a collection of things like that. So we don't want to get too hung up on the, let's say, the MLA or the academic side of it, but you do want to be careful that you're not just providing a whole bunch of research information with no acknowledgement that you've done that research or that it's coming from other sources. Especially if you're quoting, right? Again, provide some kind of citation just to let us know. And then you really want to spend some time doing this part of it, is telling us like why you chose this poet. Is there some, again, kind of like maybe a cultural connection or just something that is intrinsically interesting? Really make it your own. So you're not going to be able to Google this stuff. And that's why it's really important that you choose somebody who is of interest to you, not just like Edgar Allan Poe because he shows up at the top of the Google list of famous poets or whatever. Choose someone and works by that person that are like interesting to you, even if you don't fully understand it, quote unquote, whatever that even means. If the work has some like impact on you, then that's enough for us. That's what we care about. So of course this is due on the first due date for the unit. We'll look at those as I wrap this up. And then notice that there's no reply for this. You're just posting your project URL, and this is I think the interesting part of this overall assignment. So this is really an assignment that's not separate from the one that I just walked through, the Poets and Poems project. It's deeply connected to it. So we don't do a reply, right, in the conventional sense, but we're going to do it this way. So once you've built your Poems and Poets project, you are also going to build a quiz about that project using the Google Forms tool. So this again is really important that you're reading this early in the unit. There are ample kind of like walkthrough and tutorial things here that you can look at for how to use this tool. But I realize that the Google Forms tool is probably one that not everyone is going to have experience with in the same way that a lot of folks will have used like a Google Docs before, or even if you've never used Google Docs, you've used a word processor, so you kind of get the idea, right? So Google Forms might take a little bit more getting used to because you maybe have never used it before. And we're going to obviously use the form to create basically like a survey, but it's going to have a grade attached to it that you're going to attach to it, or there's going to be points involved. So it's really going to work like a quiz. That's in fact what it is. You can even set it up from the very start to be a quiz so you don't have to click that box later on. So any of the points that you build into your quiz aren't points that are counted for our course. So you could make all your questions like out of 1 billion points or whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's just kind of a fun way of you building a quiz that will ask other students in the class questions about your particular Poems and Poets project. And so it's a great way of inviting students to go into your project to learn about the facts that they would need to answer the questions in your quiz successfully, right? So it's sort of a fun way of you distilling some of the important information, what you want people to get out of your project, and then inviting them to engage with your project in a more sort of a more structured but a more creative form as well than just look at it and post a reply to the discussion board. So as far as my grading of your work for this matters, or as far as it's concerned, here's what matters. Again, the points that you build into your quiz don't matter. I'm going to look at the quality of your questions, right? Is there a nice sort of variety? Are they thoughtful? Is it a mix maybe of clearly right and wrong, like multiple choice style, but maybe some other short answer stuff where you're going to have to think about like what feedback to provide. And then really what I'm looking for is ample and useful feedback, whether someone doing your quiz gets it right or wrong. You want to provide really like robust feedback, sort of a paragraph explaining what the right answer is, what the wrong answer is, why it matters, all that kind of jazz. So not just, hey, great work, you got it right, or oops, looks like you got that one wrong. You really want to build it out more than that. And again, building that in forms is sort of explained in the tutorials here. There's just an image walkthrough, there's a video walkthrough, and like a lot of the Google stuff, I think if you just take your time working in forms, you'll sort of be able to figure it out. And you can obviously go in, do a bit, go back in, revise, but like I said, and like I'm saying up here, you don't want to wait until the last minute and then you're fumbling to do the work, but also to figure out how forms even operates and how it functions. And again, obviously your grade for the quiz part of it has nothing to do with how well you do on taking other people's quizzes. It matters the quality of your own quiz. And again, I'm really looking at that feedback. So I'll jump in, I'll go through your quiz, and I'll do it just like a student would, and I'll be getting that feedback. So that's how I'll access what you're doing. So you'll build your own quiz. Again, that's due on the first due date for this unit. So you want to finish the project and the quiz right by that first date, then you're posting it. And then you want to go in and take 2 other quizzes, which will necessitate you going to those projects and kind of like almost having 2 windows open at the same time. The project and the quiz, and right, doing as best as you can. And then you're posting to this discussion board, both doing the quiz, talking about which one you did, obviously, did you learn something, and sort of giving a reply that way. And then we'll round out the whole thing by building out our portfolios, adding the work from the project, and then the quiz itself. Again, no reply component here. You're just posting your portfolio URL so I can check to make sure that everyone's sort of keeping up. The other thing that I want to mention then is that this Poets and Poems project is probably one of the most ambitious that we've done so far in our class. And you'll notice that there is substantial point value at stake here. I think it's 200, which is really, really big compared to a lot of the other smaller things that we've done. So you really want to attend to building out this project, making it meaningful, really analyzing the works, providing your resources, connecting some of the, let's say, information to some of the thematic stuff or more of the analysis that you're doing, really diving into like why you chose these works, this poet, and just making your slides or your site kind of dynamic and interesting, not just a bunch of text, not just what seems kind of like randomly thrown together, whatever showed up on Google or whatever image search that you did. So really making it substantial and meaningful. So there's a lot of points to reflect the effort and kind of depth of engagement that I'm really expecting here. Okay, so Unit 5, hopefully kind of interesting for you from the learning about a poet and their poems project part of it, but also engaging in a kind of different reply mechanism by building out a quiz, having people take your quiz, and then obviously you taking others and going to see their finished project in order to get those questions right. Again, it doesn't really matter if you do get them right or wrong. It's just an opportunity to have some fun building a quiz and actually taking ones that your classmates have built as well. Okay, so again, I'm recording this on Tuesday, which puts me way out in front of our next due date, which is actually this one here for Unit 5. But again, it's a little bit more involved. You really want to get into it sooner rather than later. And as always, if you have questions, especially about the technology part, maybe your forms isn't working the way that you wanted it to, or it's giving you problems, by all means reach out and be in touch with me, and we can figure that out sooner rather than later. Okay, and again, we're almost towards the end of our class here, so really try to focus as we do our last couple weeks.